All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I have a lot to cover and I don't wanna take anyone's time. So we are recording, we see slides, let's get going. I'm Alexis Ginsberg. I'm a senior product designer at GitLab and I'm currently working in the plan stage. So the Timebox project I will be talking about today falls within the project management group in plan. Project management has teams at its core. It revolves around team planning, making sure your team is on track, in sync, not the band, and it has the support and tools it needs in order to be effective and deliver great work. Within the past month or so, plan moved towards the model of one design DRI per group. Holly Reynolds is a new DRI of project management, so I'm excited to pass the Timebox torch over to her and see how this work evolves. So to start off, there are many exciting opportunities for growth within project management. One overarching challenge we've been facing is that our users just aren't fully adopting GitLab as a planning tool. Many teams use tools like Jira or Asana for their planning, meaning users need to spend time managing integrations between this and GitLab, which they use for source code management. This can be frustrating and it takes time. Other teams may use GitLab itself for planning, but they have to rely on workarounds like exporting issues and manually compiling their own reports and spreadsheets outside of the tool. This causes context switching and tells us we have room to grow in order to become the standalone tool that users need for planning. So I want to play a short clip of a recent user interview with a Scrum Master that really illustrates this point.
When we moved to using GitLab at the beginning of the year, because we were using Jira previous to that, there was a big pull from the development team for all of the very good technical features that GitLab provides, and from literally source repos right the way through to deployment, and that is absolutely superb. But the kind of the use of it is, A, you have to get familiar with it, and B, the sort of the management of it is something that I find is a little bit lacking. You're providing quite a lot of levers, I should say, to pull under the hood, but it's just being able to get out the information in order to do the planning and the tracking that I find is a little bit lacking. But I'm finding a way around it so that the team can basically use it for all the good stuff they need.
So even though she's speaking positively about how much her team loves GitLab, listening carefully to her words tells a story of how much opportunity we have to support her more fully in her day-to-day work. We want to be in a state where users don't need workarounds to use GitLab for planning. One way we can head off this workaround extravaganza is by better enabling organizations that use agile practices to transition to and plan work in GitLab. We know that around 95% of companies practice agile in some way, and according to an awesome survey that the awesome Catherine ran, around 55% of our users use Scrum, which is in line with or maybe a bit higher than reported averages. Lastly, this is just a great business opportunity. If we give users a solution that encourages them to use only GitLab for planning, it not only benefits them, but it could also potentially increase our serviceable available market by an estimated $500 million, which is awesome. As a first step towards better supporting users who use frameworks like Scrum, we first wanted to focus on our current concept of milestones. The initial and literal ask from users was that they wanted to attach multiple milestones to any given issue. Synthesizing through this feedback a little bit, it seems like the major use case here was around the idea of sprints and releases, and being able to track sprints as well as the overall project status and release. If you look at our own documentation here, we mentioned using a milestone for both of these, but only as one or the other. Users want to have the idea of both coexisting at the same time. Based on feedback we were getting on all these issues in the backlog, and pretty old issues even, we know that users such as product managers and or development leads want an easier way to relate Timeboxes to one another. This is so they can better enable success for their teams through better time and resource tracking, and so that they can better report and forecast on these metrics. So we identified two main paths on how we could proceed with solving this problem, either by allowing users to, like they asked, attach many of what we currently define as milestones to an issue, or by first creating a system of milestone types that a user could then take advantage of at a group level. The initial proposal for types was that users could create up to 5 custom types of milestones that can then be applied to issues in a group. After some really quick exploration there, we decided to move forward with the idea of milestone types first, especially as it seemed easier for many teams to manage at a group level while maintaining best practices. It seemed less error prone to start with. So after ideating on this milestone type experience, I wanted to do some quick and scrappy internal user research to get feedback on our initial ideas. I met with a few GitLab product managers, as I really anticipated them being users of this feature and probably having a lot of passionate opinions on it. I especially wanted feedback on things I felt a bit more unsure about. So things like allowing users to create custom milestone types, the milestone type management flow and the usability of it, so editing and deleting these things, the idea of milestones being both a type and a higher level object, and any feedback on using our current milestones for planning in general. So we use the term milestone a bit differently than other products. So first I wanted to ask our internal users how they would define a milestone and its purpose. The insight here was that internally we don't even think of milestones the same way. Some people define them as when work would be addressed, some when it would be complete, some when it would be released or due. And also because the idea of multiple milestones was so popular with external users, I wanted to fully and further understand the idea of multiple milestones and how they might be useful to internal GitLabbers as well. I got a lot of feedback here that if work was in multiple milestones, it would be too big and it should be broken down more, that was a failure in planning. But users would find value, however, in having a milestone for more of like an internal working milestone and an external working milestone that communicated when work would be released. So next, without giving too much context, I asked users about what a milestone type could mean to them. Although many users mentioned in the previous question that multiple milestones would mean a breakdown in planning, they also found value in differentiating different cycles of work, especially if that meant exposing when something is being worked on or in progress versus when it would be released. That is something many of, especially our internal PMs, mentioned having a bit of trouble communicating with, especially GitLab community members on issues. Next, I was assuming that a milestone, sprint, release, version, quarter, etc. were not exactly the same type of object and that it could be confusing to have them all as the same type of milestone. This was further validated by the users. The biggest confusion here was around releases versus sprints, because we seem to use both interchangeably in planning, and also because we have the idea of a repo or a project level released. So I got really great feedback here from Jackie on the release team and everyone in the release team. So now we're working more, we're working more closely with the release team to think through how to make releases a group level object. So more on that to come. I also wanted feedback on 2 fairly rough ideas, Flow A that allows users to configure up to 5 milestone types, and Flow B that gives users default milestone types that they can just toggle on and off. When I showed users A, they were a bit intimidated by the complexity that went with the flexibility of custom types. They were worried that this was putting the onus on the user to solve the problem without much guidance on best practices, and that some kind of default seemed more MVC. Luckily, I had that to show them next. So users much preferred Flow B, which gave sensible milestone type defaults. They thought it was more intuitive, more MVC, and that it was a more standardized way. It was like a more standardized view, which would allow all users across the group to share understanding of the purpose of each milestone, which could be lost if there was custom milestone types. So again, B was the winner. 100% of users I talked to preferred Flow B. This reinforced to me that we should really focus on what defaults users wanted first. We should probably cut out the complexity of custom milestone types for MVC until we did more validation. And we should probably better understand why users would need that level of flexibility and configuration before adding it in. So based on these interviews with product managers, And some of those doubts I had around the complexity of the initial milestone flow, I iterated and tried to think through the experience of making milestone types first level objects instead, in line with milestones themselves. This seemed to simplify the flow considerably, and it also seemed easier and quicker to implement, which is great. I reported these findings to the team, and based on that collaboration with them, created rough MVC flows for what we are at the moment calling time boxes. So the basic idea of time boxes is that there are now other time box objects similar to milestones, such as sprints and releases. These time boxes will appear in areas such as issues and merge requests, and can be created and edited in a similar way as our current milestones. These objects can be enabled at the group level, and if users don't find them valuable, they don't use sprints, they can just disable them and use the product as is. For MVC, we'll only be implementing the option of a new time box called Sprint. In the future, the plan is to implement even more time boxes, perhaps with rules, reporting, and automation associated with each of them. We could also at some point reintroduce the concept of custom time boxes. So if we get feedback that validates that need, currently we're just doing some usability and concept testing with the external users around the general idea of time boxes. So next steps here are to continue working with the release team to integrate releases with time boxes in a sensible way. Again, because there is project repo level releases as well. We now have regular syncs with them, which is awesome. So shout out to everyone on the release team. We also want to continue our external research here and focus on the feedback we have already gotten around terminology and discoverability of the feature. We were thinking already about feature scope and how it could be, we could keep ideating on how to make the time box setting more contextual and discoverable. And external feedback definitely validated that that's important. So I know the secure team did some great work here, so we'll probably be syncing up with y'all soon. We also need to be very intentional when documenting this change and how it impacts milestones, because those are so crucial to the product. And we need to keep iterating on and refining how time boxes will impact all areas of the product, such as boards and roadmaps, which leads me to say that I am now the design DRI of portfolio management. So I'm excited to keep working with the team to think through how time boxes will affect things like epics, roadmaps, and higher level strategic planning. So thank you for letting me talk about time boxes. I also wanted to quickly say, I get asked about this fairly often. So when I create sketches for my designs, my favorite tool to use is my iPad and an app called Paper. It's free, or about $10 a year, I think, for the pro version. So I'm one of those people that really love sketching to ideate. So if you're like this too, I would really recommend this. So thanks a lot. I attach issues if you have comments, or just Slack me. I'm going to hand this over to, I think, the manage team.